This is the 102nd episode of the Effective Executive podcast and YouTube channel. And this week I was watching The Food That Built America. And in it was the story of TGI Fridays. And I started thinking about there were so many things I could do an episode on based on a lot of these things in the food that build America. There's all types of the snacks that build America. They're well worth watching. But I wanted to kind of give the story of briefly of TGI Fridays, which was started by Alan Stillman in New York City. He invented basically the concept, and he was basically a guy that was single and wanted to meet women. And so he wanted to create a bar that would allow women to want to go into a bar at that time, this would have been in the 60s. And not many women would go into a bar. You wouldn't find many women going to a bar in the 1960s. And so he developed this concept. They would have finger foods and vacation type drinks, and this inviting atmosphere. Had a blue building and the red and white awnings outside of the building. And he opened it up on March 13th, 1965, and kind of the rest is history. But once he started it, the concept really, people were copying it. There was a lot of things going on. Obviously, something successful gets copied pretty quickly. Then someone came into his life, Alan Stillman's life, named Dan Scoggin, who came from some wood and building supply company or something like that. And he basically suggested to Stillman that, he wanted to expand this concept with him, all over the country because it was so unique. And they developed a partnership, and he started opening places all over the U.S. and eventually the world, but starting in the U.S. And they grew and grew, and then Carlson companies bought it and bought Stillman out for $1 million, which I'm sure was a lot of money back in those days. And but Dan Scoggins stayed on as the CEO of Fridays, and continued to open restaurants all over the world. And but one of the things he ran into was that he started to notice that profits dropped 50% in 3 cities. One was Dallas, one was Houston, one was Atlanta. And he was trying to find out, what was going on. And the customer service was bad, slow, if you will. Maybe the food was cold coming out. But he also noticed that his customer base was evolving. And it was going from this kind of singles bar type of an atmosphere to more families. So he started to pivot. And this is kind of the main theme of this episode, is the ability to pivot in organizations. And it's funny to me because restaurants still have not mastered the pivot. Although, give Dan Scoggin credit, he was able to pivot, realize what was going on around him, and make changes. But a lot of restaurants go out of business because their inability to really change things. They get a concept, and we got processes around it, and it's and then they run into the ground, and then the profit goes away. They close restaurants, and the story. So I wish more restaurants would pivot. They're offering other ideas or testing them out, those types of things. But it struck me that one of the things that happens in many organizations, and I work with mostly organizations that are 150 plus people, is the pivoting is all done by some group of people. They may have an innovation group, but typically Even today, it's mostly done by the CEO or some executives that are out there making the pivot. And I don't know how long it took Dan Scoggin to realize at Fridays that profits were falling 50%. My guess is if they had the right data, they probably would have known that early on, use statistical process control charts to track the data, those types of things. That maybe it slowly slid off. It's hard to speculate, but having worked with a number of organizations that have their sales start to fall off, I can sometimes recognize, oh, well, it's really bad now. Now we're desperate. And, I go back and I start looking at their data, and it really started maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And, but they couldn't recognize it was what I reference as the boiling frog, which is it's slowly turning up the heat on the frog. Its skin doesn't feel it, it boils. And this is exactly what happened with a lot of the companies that I've worked with over the years, and now they're desperate. And fear starts to get in, and then crazy stuff goes on, if you can imagine. So what I do is much different, and the vision is that you don't want to rely on the executives and special groups and those types of things. You need people closer to your customer, recognizing when things are changing in the environment. You can smarten them up. You can teach them statistical process control, and you want to design an organization that becomes very flexible, so they can pivot. Things aren't happening in a restaurant. It shouldn't take the CEO, if it's a chain, to come in and say, oh, well, something must be happening here. They should already know that and be working on it. Now, what they do need is for the CEO and other executives, to remove the barriers to trying new things, to, if you have locked down processes, it's almost like a script in a contact center. Don't vary from the script. Well, these are the things that drive employees crazy, and why they, what's the phrase I'm hearing now? Quiet quitting, and leaving the company, and all, the FOMO of what am I missing because this job really stinks. So you need to design these organizations. It's going to help you in a variety of ways. One is react more quickly when things change. If your customer base is changing, your employees probably already knew long before, but if you don't have anything set up for that to listen to them about what's going on in the restaurant, other than to say, well, they just complain all the time, then you're going to miss opportunities to make changes and mitigate problems long before they manifest themselves in the organization. So, the execs need to remove those barriers. They need to enable employees to, increase their skills in other areas. The broader they can think, the more they can think like a CEO, the more, the better your organization is going to be. And, a lot of people just don't want to give up that control to allow employees to make decisions or talk about ways that they can improve the business. And, they have to be rewarded for those types of things too. If they come up with an idea, they recognize something, and they come up with some ideas to try them out in a restaurant. Try them out. It's not just restaurants, right? So this is any organization, but you got to design this in. This doesn't come natural. Most employees are not attuned to that. The 9 to 5, and, I put my time in, and I'm working towards something else. And, you have to build into the organization people with the mindset. And it's not just talent, it's the design of your organization first. It has to be there from the beginning. And that means from the first day that they're trained to so forth, and that you have a path that basically says, okay, we're going to continue to increase your skills, because now you also have potentially future managers of restaurants, especially if you're expanding. I mean, there's just a whole slew of things that are positive that come with training employees. So, pivot like Dan Scoggin did at TGI Fridays, and not just restaurants, right? I mean, this is for every type of organization that's out there. Getting your employees attuned to what's happening with the customer base can really not only separate you out there, but you're going to be able to move much more quickly. But I do suggest, the food that build America, the snacks that build America, the men that build America, all those programs tell you a lot about business and can inspire some ideas of things. But anyway, that's what I wanted to cover this week. And remember, there is always a better way.